Hello everyone, I'm back. This is Amy from Elysian Acres Soap, and I am here today to show you how I made these softball soaps using my new tool set that's actually available on my website now. This tool set can make either softballs or baseballs, and it's designed to work with these good old generic purple molds. They are 10 1/4 inches long and 2.7 inches wide. So that's what you need to make this design with these tools. The tool set comes with 2 scrapers and 2 extruder discs for soap dough. So yes, here we go again. Soap dough is cold process soap that has simply not been allowed to harden by being kept airtight, and so it stays pliable and consistent. And then you can extrude it using one of these handy dandy extruders, and these are the custom discs that come with my set. So there's 2. This smaller one is for the red stitches on the ball, and then this fatter one is a spacer. So if you're making baseballs, these will be white, but since I'm making softballs, they're going to be yellow today. The first thing you need to do for this design is to get all your soap dough embeds made and stacked together. So I am just filling up that small extruder and popping on the smaller red stitches disc. And then you crank them out until they get to your desired length. So the length I'm shooting for is 10 1/4 inches long. And for this design, you actually need nine of these red guys. And then the opposite color, either white or yellow, you need 8. When I was making this design, I wasn't exactly sure how many I was going to need, so I ended up actually making way more than necessary, a lot more, but it's fine because you can just smoosh up the extras and it's no problem. So for the yellow, I'm going to do it just slightly different. Instead of using this little guy, I'm pulling out the big guns. This is my large soap dough extruder from I Dream in Soap, and it's my favorite. I am using the adapter disc that came with it. So this is an adapter just to make my small 18mm disc fit perfectly. And then I will be able to crank out the yellow spacers way faster. See? Boom. It's like magic. Now it's time to assemble these. So to help with assembly, I'm going to be using just a little bit of water and a clean paintbrush. You just want the paintbrush barely damp. And what you're going to do is paint a teeny little layer of water between the embeds. You do not want these soaking wet because it's soap and soap gets very slippery when it's wet. But you want them just barely damp because that makes them just kind of tacky and then they want to stick together and it's great. So once you get that on there, you just gently push them together. And what you're going for is just to get rid of any air gaps between the 2 embeds. Then you're gonna do it again. Just add a little water again, add the next layer, massage them together, keep going and going and going until you have an adorable little soap lasagna. Now at this point, it gets very tall and it wants to lay down, so lay it down, let it. Go ahead and put it on a piece of saran wrap at this point, and this is when you want to trim it. You want to make sure that it's short enough to fit inside your mold. There's nothing worse than making a beautiful embed, letting it harden a little bit, and then figuring out it's too long for your mold afterwards. So trim it now. And then what I like to do is pull that extra bit of plastic wrap around it and make a little bundle. What this does is it helps you lift the whole thing nice and easy. Now the next step is to help this embed dry in a rounded shape a little bit. This step isn't 100% necessary, but this is how I like to do it. So you have 2 options. You can either use a smaller pipe or can of hairspray, or if you have a Pringles can, that would work wonderfully for this. But my preferred method is to use a larger 3-inch PVC pipe and actually lay the embed inside of it to get that rounded shape. Once again, It can work either way, but this is how I like to do it. So I go ahead and stand it up and very carefully just encourage it into more of a rounded shape. Now you're going to get some separation between the layers. It's okay. It's okay. This is a very, very forgiving technique. And you'll see later on that everything works out. Even when things don't work out, you think it's a disaster, this loaf still looks good somehow, magically. So this is the alternative of laying it over the top of a pipe or a can. Either way works great. It's best if you can let this kind of just hang out and firm up and relax for a few hours. Now let's make our actual soap. For this batch, I am using the heat transfer method. So I just poured my piping hot lye water straight into all of my hard butters and oils. And I'm just giving them a little stir and letting them melt. Now, while I am waiting for this to finish up melting, I have my liquid oils for my batch set aside here, and I want to go ahead and pre-color them. I want them the color of a softball, so I'm using these two neon colors, neon micas from Nurture Handmade. This is Full Throttle. It is their bright yellow, and then Force of Nature is this green. And I want these really to be that bright day glow yellow that a softball is. So I did mostly yellow with just the tiniest little hint of green. I know this batter looks more green, but they turned out yellow in the end. You'll see. Now over here, these are almost finished melting, but there's still just a few chunks. So I went ahead and gave it a little tiny blitz with my stick blender just to break up those chunks and help it melt faster. And that did the trick. That's all it needed. Then I went ahead and added in my liquid oils, and because this is part of my soap recipe, you want to make sure to get every single little drop of those oils. Now, I did not pulse this with the blender much at all. Literally about 1 second of blending is all I did to this one, and this is simply hand stirring. I didn't want that to become very thick because I need it to hang out for a while. But what I do want is for each layer to set up individually. So the way I'm achieving that is pouring off measured amounts and adding a fragrance oil that slightly accelerates the batter. That's what I just did. In this batch, I'm using Smell the Rainbow from Nurture. And it behaves really nicely, but it does help speed things up and thicken batter a little bit. Not enough to make it hard as a rock, but it helps it firm up. And that's exactly what we want for a batch like this. So I poured off my batch. That was about 21 ounces of oil. Then I set it aside for just a minute to help it firm up. And now it's time for scraper number 1. So you just pull that scraper very gently across, and all of this glop, it's going to be part of the next layer. So you just put it in a little cup, set it aside, and when it is mixed with fresh batter again, it'll help loosen it up and it'll be perfect for the next layer. Here is layer number 1, all scraped and beautiful, and now it's time to get that embed out. So I pull that out of my pipe and carefully take off the plastic wrap. And then I had to awkwardly figure out how to put it in here. As you can see here, I didn't do a wonderful job. They started separating on me, and right here it goes blump, and it broke in half. And it's okay. It's totally fine. Don't panic if that happens to you. All you have to do is just gently push them back together and encourage them back into that rounded shape. That's all there is to it. Now, this next step is going to seem a little silly because we're going to scrape without pouring fresh batter in. And the reason we're going to do this, we're taking scraper number 2 and we're going to run it along that embed because there's always going to be a little bit of extra soap dough that doesn't quite fit in. So what we're doing is scraping that down those layers, and as you can see, it pulls off just a little bit of that extra. It's sort of, you're trimming that loaf. Now you can do this with a knife also, but the scraper itself works pretty good. So that's all you're doing. You just want to scrape it down so that when you pour your next layer on, you're not going to have any lumps or bumps that prevent it from being a nice smooth pour. And speaking of pours, it's time for the next layer. Now this is a little bit more of that batter that I poured off, and again I added some fresh fragrance oil to it so that it's going to encourage it to set up quicker. Pour that in, give it a little bang because you want it to fill in all those little gaps. And then I took a spatula and just gently kind of mounded it up in the middle so that that'll help make that next scraped layer a little bit easier. So I'm going to let that set up for a few minutes, and in the meantime I'm taking the rest of this batter. So this is my whole batch. It's starting to get nice and creamy, but I want it to be a contrasting color. I want it to be a nice grassy green. So I'm adding, this is Savage Garden mica from Nurture again, and it's a very blue tone green, so I knew that it would mix with that yellow and turn nice and grassy. Now that second layer has had a chance to set up. It's time to scrape. So scraper number 2 comes into action here. And it doesn't take up much effort at all to get that into a really nice shape. It's just a matter of moving that batter around to where there's little gaps and holes until you get one nice smooth scrape. Now once that's smooth and beautiful, you want to just set it aside for a minute and let it firm up, because the next step is to pour our final layer on top. I went with that grassy green for this one, and you want to break the fall with a spatula. You don't want to just glop this on there because it is still a bit soft. It's a little flexible, and if you were to just dump that extra batter on top, you might deform the top of your ball, and nobody likes deformed balls. Sorry, Mom. So anyway, to finish off this loaf, I just put all that green on there, and my original plan was simply to make this a nice, flat, smooth top, and that's exactly what I did here. I just smoothed it out beautiful, and then I made a choice I wasn't sure if I was going to regret or not, but I did it. At the very last minute, I decided to make some cute little softball embeds to go on top. I had this soap dough, so I just rolled it into a ball, and what I did is took my little spoon here, dipped it in my red mica, and boop, nope, needs a little more, boop, cute little softball. And I was racing against the clock at this point. You don't usually make your embeds after you've already poured your loaf, but I did it, and look, it actually turned out pretty cute. I was happy with it. I don't regret it. But I don't recommend doing that either because it was really stressful. So here is the loaf the very next day, ready to take out. Pulling off that silicone is just the very best thing. This loaf was a little bit soft, and so you'll see that the corners aren't super perfect, but you just go boop, smoosh. There, fine. Never happened, right? But anyway, let's cut it. Unfortunately, you can't hear the ping on this video because my kids were fighting like heathens, so I had to mute it, but here's the cut. Cute, cute, cute. I love these little softballs. Honestly, the only reason I made softballs is that I didn't have enough white soap dough to make baseballs, and I was impatient. But I really do love how these turned out. And I know there's some softball girlies and boys out there too who will probably be really excited for this representation. So I hope you love them. And if you feel so inspired to make your own batch, you can find those tools on my website. Thanks for watching, everybody.